This is the Initiates Podcast. Here, we create space to explore the path of initiation as we reawaken the forgotten wisdom that resides within us all. I am your host and guide, Natalie Grace. Join me every Thursday for an enlightening exploration of contemporary spirituality. It's my honour to journey with you. Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining me. On today's episode, I'm going to be sharing a beautiful channeled message with you all about the subject of transformation. We're at episode 10 now, and I've started to get into the swing of weekly recording. And up to this point, I've felt certain topics emerge that wanted to be shared, wanted to be explored, wanted to be talked about. And this week I kind of hit a bit of a wall. I've got lots of works in progress. I have some really interesting topics coming up to discuss, but nothing really felt like it wanted to be heard this week. So I decided to go into the Akashic Records because I got such a beautiful response to the channeling episode from a few weeks back about the density of thought. And I think I always knew deep down that this was probably the best way for me to create these podcast episodes, by consulting my higher wisdom and asking to receive the message that needs to be heard this week, because it felt so natural and such a beautiful message came through when I did that. I went into meditation and I asked to receive the message that needed to be shared this week. And what came through was a beautiful message about transformation. I feel like it's divinely timed. I feel like many of us, in fact, all of you listening, there's Brad, are undergoing a process of personal transformation, of spiritual development, of awakening. And this message touches on those themes. I think collectively we're also going through an era of transformation, a very, like, if we're looking at linear time, long-term transformation between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. Some speculate this to take around 200 years before we settle into the new era, to the new age. So we're dealing with that transformation. On a shorter time frame, we are working through I would say, decade of big transformation, moving from a post-industrial age into, I'm not even sure what we can call this next age, an age of technological expansion, an age of acceleration, an age of, I want to say, alternate reality. But I also see that as an age of opportunity to come home to ourselves, opportunity to remember our forgotten wisdom, something that's really settled in for me as being the ultimate goal of this podcast. I say it in the intro, but it's really become clear that that's what I'm here to do with these weekly messages, to help awaken the forgotten wisdom that resides within each of us, and as a collective, our forgotten history, our forgotten technology, our forgotten intelligence of our bodies, of our spirit. So there's so much to do with transformation here. And today's message is going to explore the theme of transformation. So in the first part of this episode, I'll be reciting my channeled message from the Akashic Records on this theme of transformation. If you haven't heard me do this before, basically what happens is I go into meditation. I enter my Akashic Records and I receive a message that I channel through automatic writing. I put it into one of my yellow journals and then I recite it. I record myself reciting the message. So that's what you'll be hearing. Then I'll be back for a reflection on this message. I've already written some notes about this because I was able to see many parallels that this message contained with some really big spiritual themes of this time, of this moment. And for that reason, I really do believe this message is divinely timed for us to hear right now. And if you discover this episode at a much later date on the linear time frame, it holds exactly the same power, exactly the same relevance, exactly the same divinity in regards to the moment when you hear this message. This is the exact moment that you are supposed to hear this message, no matter what that date is on our calendar. So reflections on the parallels of this transformational journey with the journey of spiritual awakening, with the idea of taking the red pill and escaping the matrix, with the concept of the shift from the third to the fifth dimension, and even parallels with religious stories of ascension. All right, are you ready? Let's journey. I opened the session by asking, what should I talk about on the podcast this week? What is a vibrational message that I'm called to share with the collective? And here is the answer. You are called to share your message about transformation. Transformation is a process of power. What is it to transform? At this point in my meditation, I sense the presence of a butterfly. What would it feel like to embody the journey of chrysalis as a butterfly? To come to the end of your time in one form, only to awaken anew. This is what we are going through right now, a collective chrysalis moment, a transformation, an awakening, a changing of form, a metamorphosis. Think of the emotional journey required to facilitate this process of chrysalis. Now I sense the journey of transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Imagine yourself in this journey. Life is normal for a time. Life as a caterpillar doing caterpillar things, experiencing this world as a caterpillar, with the senses of the caterpillar, with the urges of the caterpillar, with the instincts of the caterpillar. At a point, an awareness starts to dawn, an awareness in the deepest layers of self that something is coming, an impending, unexplainable feeling that the world, your reality, your existence is about to change. This awareness builds to the point where you become aware that you will be embodying this change. You don't know what the change is, but you feel it, an inevitable physical and chemical embodiment. Confusion sets in. You start to feel unsettled in your own body, in your own skin. You begin to feel unmoored from what you know as your reality. You first seek to deny this feeling, this inevitability. You yearn to stay the same, to go back to the way things were when you were blissfully unaware, when you were simply a caterpillar, when you were you, as you always have been. When you were you, the you have always been. When you were you, the you've always known. When you were you, the you that others knew you as. But you feel different now. You sense the changes arriving. You feel it surrounding you. It cannot be denied. When it becomes apparent that the change is here, the fear arrives. What is happening? Who are you? How will you cope? What will you become? Will you know yourself? Will you feel at home in this world? Will your friends and family still be here? Will they still know you, love you? Will you love them? And what happens? What will happen to you during this process? The fear builds and triggers angst, a desperation to know what will happen, a need to grasp for control. But don't you realize? Fear is the portal of change. At the moment that your fear reaches its peak, you know that there is no return. You have progressed too far now. There is no way to avoid your transformation. There is no way to avoid the fear it holds. The only way is through. And so you go inside. You reach deep within yourself for direction. Your deepest self speaks. Honor your instinct, it says. This brings you comfort. You surrender. Your skin feels tight and begins to form a shell. Your deepest self begins to build your cocoon. You surrender to your body and what it asks you to do. You surrender to the call of Mother Gaia, holding you in her safety. In the safety of the cocoon you have co-created with her. You surrender to the wisdom of your instinct. Your spirit steps forth to guide you through the process of transformation. It asks you to rest, to sleep, and so you surrender and allow the alchemy to take place. After a time, your spirit stirs. It calls you to awaken. You return to your body. It feels different. It has expanded. You feel like you've taken new form. It feels new to occupy your body. It feels different, foreign. It's odd, but there is a spirit of excitement within, of anticipation. Your mind is foggy. It is dark, but you realize that the change has occurred. You feel a deep yearning to leave the darkness, to seek the light. There is a feeling of constriction as you become aware of the cocoon. You realize you've outgrown this safe house. It no longer fits you. It's no longer required. It can be discarded now. You seek the light. You seek space. You seek to meet your new self outside in the world, in the light. Is the world still the same, or has it also changed? Let's find out. And with that urge, that spirited curiosity, you break free. You leave your cocoon. You feel the instinctive urge to take flight. Before your mind can tell you to crawl, you feel yourself flying. You have wings. You feel the sensation of air on your body. You feel your wings moving yourself through the air with grace, with purpose. It feels like being born again. It is exhilarating. It is frightening. It is joyous. This is your new reality. Here you can fly. In the air, like the birds who once preyed on you. New dangers await, but this does not occupy your spirit right now. You can fly. You are still you, but you have changed form. The world is just the same, but now you experience it anew, from a perspective once unimaginable. Your friends and family are here. They see you've changed form, and now they have the joyous pleasure of knowing you again, anew. This is what you are all experiencing right now, a transformation of self, a rebirth and renewal of the collective. The world remains, however, it evolves with you, as now you get to experience it in a new form, and it gets to home you in a completely new way. This is life renewed. End transmission. So, firstly, I want to ask you to reflect on how that made you feel, hearing that message and imagining yourself as the butterfly, going on that journey with me as the butterfly. I wonder, did that feel familiar to you? The feelings of the fear of the unknown, of the awareness of an impending change, an impending transformation, a deep knowing that your spirit is here to guide you through these times. Because those messages felt familiar to me. And as I was writing it, I'm aware of what I'm writing when the message is coming through. But it kind of bypasses my brain and goes straight from my, I guess, crown to my hand and onto the paper. So my awareness of what I'm writing is as it hits the page. And even then, I'm writing furiously, but I was still like, wow, this journey, this story feels so familiar. It's so resonant with what we talk about in a personal awakening journey. And so that's my first question to you. What I'm wondering is how that resonated with you. And please do share how you've received this message with me. Send me a DM on Instagram, send me an email, whatever form you wish to take. I would really love to hear from you on how this message hit, how this felt for you. I want to also say how good it felt to receive the content for this podcast episode in this way. It felt really aligned, and it feels aligned delivering it now. It feels like one of the reasons why I learned to access the Akashic Records. And I just want to pop in now and say that I am aware that there's probably people listening who aren't familiar with the Akashic Records. They don't quite know what that means. I will do a full episode in the future on the Akashic Records, diving into my journey in accessing the Akashic Records and my understanding of what the Akashic Records are. But for now, I just want to say this is energetic data field that any one of us can tune into, kind of like a radio station. You're tuning into the specific frequency of that data field and retrieving the information from your personal records that you wish to receive right now. So I'll leave that explanation there, but I realize now there might be people who are like, what the hell are you talking about going into your records? That's what it is for me. So yeah, I feel like I was guided to seek messages for you all in this way. And it really was an honor to deliver this message to you. So I'm really excited now to go into a discussion, a reflection on how I've received and perceived the message that came through today about the journey of the butterfly. And the journey of the butterfly, this experience of chrysalis, as that transformational process is known, is really fascinating to learn about. I'm familiar with it at a basic level, and I'm definitely now more familiar with the potential emotional journey that the creature goes through in the metamorphosis. But from a more, say, scientific perspective, I wasn't super familiar with the process, and it was really interesting to learn about it. I'll put a link in the show notes to a short video by David Attenborough on the process that the caterpillar goes through to turn into a butterfly. It's quite fascinating. But it was very interesting to learn that the cocoon, the chrysalis, is actually formed by the caterpillar's outer layer. And throughout the caterpillar's lifespan, apparently it sheds its skin. But at some point, there's no more skin to be shed and it's time to transform. And that outer layer creates essentially the cocoon. And it's fascinating because that's the intelligence of the body changing shape when the spirit, I perceive the spirit knows it's time. It's time to change. It's time to transform. Signals to the body to go through this natural process, to trigger this process of creating the hardened shell that forms the cocoon. And this is the process that the caterpillar, in my knowing, becomes aware of. This physicality, but there's probably a deep sense before this reality of the physical change emerges that the reality is going to shift. And I feel like that's what we're all going through right now. I feel like this message is divinely timed to be received right now. An affirmation that our bodies are aware of what's happening. Our world is aware of what's happening. And our bodies and world have always known that this was going to occur. It's just our minds weren't aware. That etheric blueprint of our destiny. It's funny that I believe our spiritual selves completely understand what that looks like, how it takes shape, when it should occur. And it's just our minds that are unaware. And our bodies know what to do. Our bodies hold this deep intelligence, this instinct, this memory, genetic encoding, just like the caterpillar holds the genetic encoding for its own transformation at the right time for that caterpillar, that our bodies also hold this intelligence and know what to do, that our minds get in the way of this. Our minds have the disbelief. Our minds hold the fear. And that triggers our emotional reaction. It triggers our emotional journey. That misalignment between the intellect of the mind and the intelligence, the natural intelligence of the body. And this emotional journey is also divinely designed. This is an inherent part of the transformation because we are here to feel. We've incarnated here to feel the full spectrum of emotions. And so we can't discount that emotional journey as being, say, unnecessary or silly because it's all just triggered by the mind. It's not about that. There's a reason why our minds perceive differently to our natural bodies. There's a reason why our mind triggers our emotions. So honoring that part, that misalignment, is a huge part of the journey of transformation. And it's so much of what we learn through shadow work, the awareness of the emotions and the relationship between thought and emotion. The shadow work teaches us to have this awareness of our thoughts and feelings, to develop acceptance of those instead of resistance, and surrender to the flow in order to build our emotional intelligence and to ascend beyond those ego-based responses. I'm going to consult my notes here because I did some reflection around the timing before I started recording. And I feel like if you are listening to this when it gets released, we have just entered eclipse season. And in about a week's time, a little less than a week, we're going to be experiencing the eclipse in Scorpio. And I'll just disclose here, I'm not a professional astrologer by any means. I would say I'm an amateur and I'm super interested and curious about astrology, and I love immersing myself. That's how I like to learn best. So I just absorb information about astrology, and I've been building my knowledge base in that absorption process. And I've been reading the takes by different astrologers on what this nearing Scorpio eclipse is going to feel like for us collectively. And it sounds like it's huge transformation energy. I felt like Scorpio has a big presence energetically in our realm at the moment, this year, especially ever since the nodal shift happened and the South Node moved into the sign of Scorpio, because that really, for me, feels like a drain pipe, I want to say, a release, a huge release of karmic density, perhaps, is a good way to describe it. And it's this inevitable release of density that's holding us back from our own transformation. And the reason why at this time the South Node has arrived in the sign of Scorpio is to facilitate a purging of our old forms, because we are here to transform. And surrender, as we learned, surrender was so important for the caterpillar. The caterpillar, its only option in the end was to surrender. And I don't think by that stage it was a difficult option, because one, the fear is so intense, but two, there's at the deepest level, there's an inner knowing that your spirit knows how to take care of you. Your spirit wouldn't put you in a position that would be ultimately dangerous or harmful for you. And the surrender, the going with the flow in this transformational process is super important, because the more we resist, the more difficult this transformation is. The more we resist, the more it will hurt. And so one of the messages that wants to be heard right now, I feel, is the importance of surrender, especially around this Scorpio eclipse, to surrender to what is inevitable, to surrender to the purging that is required to take place right now, to surrender to flow, to surrender to your own instinct. The instinct is so powerful. It's so intelligent. Surrender to your intuition. And I feel like right now the intuition is to let our instincts kind of guide us to flow into co-creation. That was another really big theme here, that at the point of surrender, there's a realization that Gaia holds us in safety, that Gaia co-creates with us. It is the co-author of our transformation. So as we go through this process of purging, of release, of shedding skin, of realizing a new form, of shedding density, surrendering to allow Gaia to help us co-create our higher selves, our higher version of ourselves, our ascendance. Surrendering into knowing that everything is evolving just as it's supposed to, and getting into the flow of that natural evolution. This transformation, this metamorphosis, is divinely designed. This is supposed to happen right now. So the sooner we can accept that fear is a part of this process, the sooner we can move to the stage of surrender and allow some of that pressure to be released into the loving arms of our mother, Gaia, who will step into the role of co-creator with us. So I find that to be such a beautiful message. There are deep parallels with the individual journey of awakening here. I'm sure you felt that too. The caterpillar goes from a state of ignorance or just existence without question to this state of awareness. And we can align that to the state of being asleep and that process of awakening. And the wisdom that I received from channeling this message is that the process of transformation occurs in the journey from ignorance or sleep to awareness or awake, the transformation doesn't happen after you wake up. It's the process of waking up that is the transformation. And it's beautiful. Once that caterpillar becomes aware of what is happening, of its potential to change form, the alchemy occurs. The alchemy is already begun at that stage, and the caterpillar can realize itself in a higher form as the butterfly. And this is literally a higher form. This creature now will have wings and it can fly in the air. Once the caterpillar becomes the butterfly, it can't go back to being a caterpillar. Once you are awake, you can't go back to being asleep. And it's because when you're awake, you've uncovered buried wisdom. This wisdom cannot be lost. And this wisdom is gained through that experience of transformation that I just talked about. The wisdom is gained through opening yourself to the change, of opening yourself to the transformation and working through the fear of becoming something different, becoming someone different, releasing those layers of identity that once defined you, allowing yourself to evolve. So it's a beautiful thing to imagine ourselves as the caterpillar evolving into the butterfly. And I felt so supported in receiving this message and reading it when I was finished, because I have felt like I gained a new understanding of the process and a much more simplified understanding. And this is the beauty of seeking wisdom from the Akashic Records. It can be so poetic and allow you to see something that's quite difficult when you're in the midst of it with new eyes, through a new lens that is usually, it's like putting on a pair of glasses that somehow make things easier to understand, easier to see. And so I feel like if you have been struggling with understanding the changes that are happening in the world around you, if you have been struggling with like the process of transformation in your own self, in your own life, you've been finding your awakening journey very challenging. And I know how this can be. I'm probably a few steps ahead of some of you. And that process of darkness, of going into the depths, of kind of having to shed all those layers of identity and being left with the flame of your spirit, it's so difficult and it can be really scary and quite hard to understand. And I feel like this message was a gift to share with you all, especially those who are in the midst of that process right now, in those dark parts, to help provide you with a new way of seeing the process, that what awaits is your ability to fly. What awaits is a completely new experience of the world that provides you with literally a higher perspective of reality, of you, who you are, and how you fit into the world. I also felt parallels with some other kind of narratives that exist in our reality that we're all fairly familiar with. I'm sure many of you listening have watched the film The Matrix trilogy. And it really, that story of the caterpillar awakening to the reality that it's destined to become a butterfly. And that process of evolving into the butterfly, into that new form, felt a lot like the story of Neo. It felt a lot like the realization that once you know there's a red pill that you can take, for most of us, there's no going back from that point. That's when all this alchemy starts. You don't even need to take the red pill to know that the world you thought existed isn't actually what you thought it was. And then once you take it, once you go through, like, push through that fear and take the pill, there is no going back. You can't go back to being a caterpillar once you've evolved into your new form. You must face your fears. You must face your confusion, your disbelief, your denial. You must fully feel all these things. And you need to go through that process, that often difficult process, to get to the point of surrendering to your destiny. And that was a lot of Neo's journey, him surrendering to his destiny as the one. And we all Neo. Our destiny is to transform, is to evolve, is to realize ourselves as co-creators, to realize our power as spiritual beings. And so I wonder if you also felt a resonance with the Matrix when you were listening to that message. Another story that feels like a parallel to the story of the butterfly is the story of Jesus and his ascension, his resurrection. And even if you're not religious and you feel a bit of resistance to that, we can also see as the whole story of Jesus being the story of the butterfly. It goes both ways here. And it's a very powerful story, that story of transformation and ascension to a higher form. And so we have some very powerful symbols working here. We have the cocoon symbolizing the tomb. We have the wings. After the caterpillar leaves the cocoon, it realizes it has wings, and these wings allow it to ascend. In a similar way, Jesus realized his ability to ascend, to travel upwards. And so this emergence in the new form, that chrysalis, took place for Jesus inside of the tomb. He underwent a literal death in order to change his form from the old form of the mortal human to his ascended form, risen Christ. So there's some really powerful parallels here. The final parallel I want to talk about is the journey from third dimensional form to fifth dimensional form. So put very simply, that shift from 3D to 5D can be represented by the caterpillar evolving into the butterfly, that it's a process of deep transformation on all levels, even physical, especially physical, where the caterpillar emerges as its evolved form, that it was destined to become. And this evolved form has an elevated perspective. It has lost some of its density. And what I mean by this is it doesn't necessarily mean that the butterfly is lighter than the caterpillar, although it might be. It's more that throughout the process of shedding its layers of identity, it becomes untethered from the gravitational pull, the heaviness of that. The caterpillar lives much closer to the ground. It must keep its feet on the ground or on a tree or a leaf, something tangible at all times. There is a weight of gravity on the caterpillar that's no longer felt by the butterfly. The butterfly is able to rise higher, and therefore it has an elevated perspective. It has a higher perspective than it had when it was closer to the ground. And its ability to fly means that it holds less density because it's not returning back to Earth. And the other part of this is that in the transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly, there is an awareness gained through that experience of transition, of changing form. There is a new lived experience of the internal alchemy, that alchemization of form, that metamorphosis, which to me is very aligned with how spiritual guides and teachers talk about the journey from a third dimensional state or perspective or reality to a fifth dimensional reality. So when we talk on an individual level of ascending, that is often, I guess, like the end goal, to ascend to a 5D form, to a fifth dimensional perspective. And the butterfly is a beautiful symbol of that. So if you have any trouble understanding or relating to that concept of the shift from 3D to 5D, a very simple way of looking at it is that the caterpillar represents the 3D and the butterfly represents the 5D. So it would probably be good to just reflect as well on this symbolic meaning of the butterfly before I finish this episode, because I love to work with the language of symbols. And I spoke of genetic encoding earlier. I really do feel like the language of symbols is universal. It's universally understood by us at almost a genetic level. I feel like it's stored in our genetic encoding, and it's been buried. Our logical mind, our educational system, our intellect has forgotten the importance of that language. So I always take the opportunity to work with this language of symbols whenever I can. And the butterfly is a pretty cool symbol. The symbol of the butterfly represents the psyche, which is very interesting because any transformation that we experience as humans, we perceive through our psyche, and it has impacts on our psychology on a conscious and subconscious level. And it's almost like a dance between the conscious and subconscious when it comes to transformation. The subconscious is working at that intuitive and instinctive level, working with that very deep intelligence of our bodies, of our spirits, to guide us through periods of transformation. While our conscious mind uses thoughts to rationalize and uses emotions to feel our way through the experience, almost as a polar opposite to the subconscious. So that makes sense because we live in a duality, and it's almost like when we come to the point of traveling through the transformation, it's that point of balance between the conscious and the subconscious. Some archetypal symbols of the butterfly include it representing the mystery of physical metamorphoses, and that represents transmutations of the soul. The chrysalis is also an interesting symbol because it's both the vessel for the transformation and it is the transformation itself. So both the butterfly and the chrysalis have very multi-layered symbolic meanings. It's interesting too to think about the butterfly and its difference from a moth. They both go through a similar journey of transformation, but they come out of it slightly different, which is super fascinating. The moth is more nocturnal and is entranced by the light while it exists in the dark, whereas the butterfly navigates with the sun. And in that sense, it embodies more light because it works with the light rather than working with the dark. So again, going back to that 3D and 5D perspective, in some ways you can say that the moth is more of a third dimensional transformation, whereas the butterfly is that evolution into the fifth. Butterflies also have a sexual layer of symbolic meaning, because while a caterpillar, its purpose is to eat in order to get to the point of its transformation into a butterfly. And once it arrives as a butterfly, once it re-emerges into the world as a butterfly, it is there to procreate. So it's gone from a consumer to a creator, which is really interesting as well. And in transforming those roles, it again loses some of its density because, and this is something we hear about in the shift from 3D to 5D as well, the caterpillar is eating far more dense food. Yes, it's only munching on leaves, but in the process of chrysalis, the digestive system of the caterpillar transforms. It becomes much lighter. It loses much of its digestive system, actually, because it no longer needs to process leaf matter. It only needs to consume nectar, which is much lighter, and I would like to say higher in vibration, because the nectar comes from the flower, which is the highest vibrational part of the plant. As it moves from consumer to creator, it becomes lighter, loses density, and its body changes to reflect that. Its physicality changes to reflect that new reality, that new purpose. And I'm sure we can all relate to that too, as we go through our own journeys of awakening, and we start to re-emerge in the world as our more ascended selves, as higher versions of ourselves. Some of us literally don't need to eat as much as we used to, or our taste for what we wish to consume changes. But from a spiritual or an energetic level, we start to feel lighter. Our spirits start to feel lighter. The world doesn't seem as heavy as it used to. We don't feel the weight on our shoulders in the same way. So it's very interesting to look at the butterfly as a symbol that we can align with and learn from. And just as a final reflection, this is something that fascinates me. The idea that as we evolve, as we ascend in our vibration, we humans, we have the potential to exist differently in this world, that we have the potential to feel less dense, that we have the potential to experience gravity in a different way. I find this to be a really interesting prospect, that there is a potential, it is possible that even in our dense physical meat bodies, that we can experience the Earth's gravity in a different way. And perhaps, as within, so without, that is why we're seeing in our external world, as we go through this ascension process, and I don't want to say we're all ascending to master status. I just mean as we go through the journey of self-improvement, of awakening, of development, that we can emerge from these stages of up-leveling into experiencing our physical world in a different way. And something that I have already felt on my own journey is the feeling of being less dense, and therefore the feeling of the weight, the atmospheric weight of the world, that pressure starting to lessen ever so slightly. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that this exploration has provided you with a new insight into transformation, a new insight into awakening, and perhaps some additional perspective to help you navigate the experience of transformation and those emotions that it triggers. But most of all, I hope that you enjoyed hearing that beautiful message from the Akashic Records about the journey of the caterpillar to becoming the butterfly. If you would like to work with me, I offer soul transmission readings, working with the Akashic Records along with the symbols of the tarot. Check the show notes, all my links are there. I also offer some beautiful vibrational medicines, flower essences, very similar to the nectar I spoke of earlier. If you would like to check those out, check the show notes. The links to mystallflowerguide.com.au are there as well. Thank you again for your time and attention. And until next week, I wish you peace, I wish you love, I wish you space.